Good evening, and welcome to the Dreary Midnight Podcast. My name is Lisa. My pronouns are she, they.
My name is Celeste. My pronouns are she, her.
We have no new reviews, but we're still 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. So
Five stars.
Shout out to Nana Susanna, who left a review in November. Recently learned who that was, and I'm related to them, but shout out to you. You know who you are. If people who are not related to us want to review, not that we appreciate it, maybe even if you are related.
You know what? I do have a lot of cousins.
Yeah.
I'm sure that they would all love to review, right, guys?
At all of Celeste's cousins, and all of my cousins, I guess, but mostly Celeste. And shout out to my cousin for leaving the one review we have. We don't... Okay, listen. As long as it's 5 stars and has some words in it, you say what you want. Like, give us your sparkling water review. We need the alcohol.
Currently, I am drinking cherry limeade sparkling water.
And I have lemon lime. So
we're in a lime mood today. It's springtime.
It is. It's the end of March. And peak season has taken over our psyches, apparently. All right. But we are talking today about will-o-the-wisps. Because we had a story last week, and now we're talking about it more.
Your infamous will-o-the-wisp sighting.
That wasn't actually a will-o-the-wisp at all. Yeah, go back to our last episode, and you'll hear more about that. But with all that said, let's get into it. What do you know about will-o-the-wisps?
Well, the first obvious thing is that scene from Brave. You remember? Have you ever seen Brave?
I have not seen Brave.
Okay, you and me.
Okay.
Disney Plus at my house.
Okay.
We're gonna watch Brave.
Next Patreon live stream. I don't know.
Okay, so there's this scene in Brave in the very beginning where she's like a wee little lass, and she sees these little will-o'-the-wisps in the forest, and they lead her to, I think it was like an arrow or something that she had shot into the forest. And then she sees them later on when she's a teenager, again, will-o'-the-wisp, and they lead her to the witch's hut. And that's how the main story gets started. Huh. Honestly, we should see the movie. It's really good.
Well, it's interesting because most of the folklore means you're led astray somewhere, like you're getting drowned in the swamp or whatever.
Yeah, well, obviously the Disney version is not going to have them being led to the swamp.
Yeah, led to their death.
They were nice in the Disney version.
Yeah.
However, I am very intrigued to hear about the actual folklore.
Though I couldn't find many stories of like my cousin died by following this, because like if you're traveling alone in the swamp and you follow a will-o'-the-wisp, you're not gonna like know for sure that that's what killed you. Like it could just be swamp gas in more ways than one, but we'll get into it. It is a phenomenon recorded on basically every continent except Antarctica, because there's no swamps on Antarctica.
That's fair.
We're mostly going to stay in Europe and the US, but I would want to get into like the Asian and specifically like the ones in India and China and stuff.
I literally didn't know it was a universal thing. Whenever I think will-o'-the-wisp, I think like Ireland, Scotland, England, that type of
so it's
Northern
different names in different locations. In Australia, something similar but not identical is called the Min Min lights, which is worth getting into. And there's different names depending on where you are. The most common I've seen are Ignis Fatuus, which is Latin for foolish fire, and will-o'-the-wisp, but it's also in the same realm as jack-o'-lantern or jack-o'-lantern. And jack-o'-lantern is the Appalachian name for it, but then again Appalachian is colonized by like English and Irish and European. So from an article about folklore of the Buffalo Valley in the Journal of American Folklore in 1891, defines it as follows. It seems to be a ball of fire, varying in size from that of a candle flame to that of a man's head. It is generally observed in damp, marshy spaces, moving to and fro, but it has been known to stand perfectly still and send off scintillations.
As you approach it,
Sorry, I'm like doing hand motions.
You're good. It's just
I'm just trying to visualize.
Yeah. No, you're good. I just glance over and Celeste is doing a dance, kind of. It's fun.
Well,
It's,
because it's like the size of a candle or the size of a head. So I
Yeah.
was like measuring, and then it was like
Yeah.
moving back and forth. So I was
Yeah.
waving my arms.
yeah. All right. So, sends off scintillations.
as you approach it, it will move on, keeping just beyond your reach. If you retire, it will follow you. That these fireballs do occur and that they will repeat your motions seem to be established, but no satisfactory explanation has yet been offered that I have heard. Those who are a little superstitious say it is the ignition of the gases rising from the marsh.
There's regional variations like the Min Min lights in Australia. In the Bengal Mountains, they're called Alea. In Luz Mala in Argentina and Uruguay.
Luz
Okay.
mala. So basically just bad light or evil light.
Yeah. We're going to be sticking mostly to North America and America, a little bit of Europe. But there's a lot. We could do a part 2 on will-o-the-wisps.
That would be fun. Will-o-the-wisp in international countries.
Yeah, but dictionary.com said the first use of Ignis Fatuus, the phrase Ignis Fatuus, was between 1555 and 1565, and the first use of the term will-o'-the-wisp is between 1600 and 1610. The earliest big reference in like a major work that I saw was in Paradise Lost by Milton.
Oh.
It was in 1667. Obviously, it started earlier than that. And Satan
To have it written down and people know what it means.
Yeah. But Satan is compared to the will-o'-the-wisp in Book 9, line 631 to 42, when leading Eve to the tree of knowledge, because it's leading you astray.
That's actually a very good comparison. Also, it obviously was then in the vernacular enough that people would understand and make the connection.
Yeah. But other fun fact, Milton was the one that coined that the fruit of knowledge is an apple.
Really?
In the Bible, it's just like it's the fruit of knowledge.
It's just that was the tastiest and most enticing fruit, I guess.
Yep. This is the one that's gonna fuck you up, I guess.
I'm assuming he didn't also say what variation. Was it a Red Delicious or was it a Fiji?
I don't know. I don't know the degree to which they had major apple variations in 1650s, but So
Interesting. I didn't know that was Milton.
And we have stories.
Stories.
A couple of stories. They're all very short. And so this one is from Virginia Folk Legends, which was part of the Virginia Writers Project during like the 30s and 40s. And you're going out into rural areas, collecting a lot of stories, a lot of local lore and things like that. And so this one is called Jack M'Lantern's Lights in the Woods. Catherine Newman was interviewed by Laura Virginia Hale in Front Royal, Warren County in June of 1942. And because it's 1942, they kept a lot of they typed in the regional dialect a lot. So if I start pronouncing things weird, that's why. So
Weird is subjective anyway.
Yeah. So Catherine Newman says,
I used to know a lot of that stuff you asked about, but I reckon I done forgot most of it, or just can't recollect it offhand. I remember how the old folks used to tell about jack-o'-lanterns.
And Laura adds in, my informant insisted that the middle syllable was ma, so it's jack-o'-lanterns, not jack-o'-lanterns.
Jack-o'-lanterns.
Yeah.
That actually rolls off the tongue a lot better.
Yeah.
Old folks used to tell about jack-o'-lanterns that'd lead you off at night. Back in those days, there wasn't lights everywhere to guide a body like it is today. If you stand out to go somewhere at night, you'd try to spot a light in some neighbor's house and follow that. On real dark, foggy nights, one of them jack-o'-lanterns would appear in front of someone's traveling along a lonely road or path, looking just like a light way off in somebody's window, so as to make that person follow it. Then it'd lead him off into the thickets or swamps somewhere. Why, I've heard of folks being lost all night following one of them jack-o'-lanterns. So if a boy had to go somewhere at night and didn't want to be led off by a jack-o'-lantern, he'd turn his pockets wrong side out. That'd keep him away, they said.
Okay.
And that is Front Royal.
Okay. So that was really the first time I kind of visualized, because for some reason I was thinking these lights, like I wasn't thinking about them in the middle of the night, like when it was actually dark. I know. My brain is weird. So
You're fine.
here's because like in the movie or whatever, it's like a daytime, and then you can still see the little will-o'-the-wisp. But and I guess I was thinking even if it was dark, if you saw like a little light moving around, you might not trust it. But I didn't think about the fact that it would look like somebody's house, like
Yeah.
somebody's window.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
would just, you'd see a light and you'd be like, oh, that must be my neighbor's.
Yeah.
And walk over to it.
Yeah, you're usually assuming it's either like a fixed point or like there's somebody else carrying a light. Because as this one points out, like this is usually in the days before like every single road is well lit. And so you have to be like, oh, well, that's a fixed point. There's civilization that way. And that's what gets you.
I guess that's why I was like not thinking about it from, oh yeah, it would be dark, because nowadays nothing is ever really dark.
Yeah.
We have cameras, we have flashlights in our phones.
Yeah.
So we could always kind of find.
Yeah. Some
But-
sort of way.
yeah,
At
but-
least even if it's only a couple of feet.
Before they had electric lights. That's suspicious.
Right. Yeah. So another one that I saw was the Gordon Light from Arkansas. So Gordon, Arkansas is located south of Little Rock and is a small town of about 2,000.
Oh, it's teeny.
Yeah. So apparently people in Gordon have seen the lights more than 100 times in their life. And while it is an accepted fact of this place, those same people still have no idea just how to explain why the light exists.
Okay. 2,000 people, and you're saying there's been hundreds of sightings.
Yeah.
Those are that is a ratio.
Yeah.
that is very high.
Yeah.
There is a legend which will come at no surprise to ghost light buffs that tells of a railroad worker who was working along a stretch of tracks outside of town. He accidentally fell in the path of an oncoming train, and his head was severed from his body. Of course, the ghost of this railroad worker is said to walk the tracks at night, and the ghost light is from his lantern as he searches for his missing head. The only thing that makes this story a little different from other tales of the Phantom Brakeman is that a real-life murder did take place here,
Oh my God.
may explain why the light was seen a short time later.
And I'll leave the link for where I got that in the show notes as well. But
What was the actual murder? Did it still go into it?
it didn't say it all.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's annoying. But this is now starting to sound reminiscent of those Brown Mountain lights that we talked about last week.
Yeah.
Or not last week, but last
Last time.
episode.
Last time. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, that's sort of what
Ghost
inspired
lights.
this. Yeah. And then there's another one of Lantern Jack, which is a European story. And I did not record which country, but I assume it's like UK somewhere or Western Europe. And this one calls it Lantern Jack. And this is one of the apparitions of light and one of the most mischievous, tricky of the ghostly family. What form or color he has we know not, as no one has ever clearly seen him. His lantern has been seen, and he has been heard splitting his sides with laughter at his own tricks, and the perplexity of those whom he might have led astray. People say that his laugh was not unlike the loud sudden neighing of a horse. His light was seen on dark nights like a lighted lantern on the sheep paths on the hillsides. If he happened to be far off, no one was deceived, as his ungainly movements betrayed him as Lantern Jack in search of his sheep. And as the saying goes, an ignis fatuus deceives not many of us. The time he generally succeeded with his mischief was when he found someone all alone traveling a path on open fields. He would begin by appearing as a small speck of fire or a clear blue flame, which he moved before the wayfarer along the middle of the path until his attention had been secured. Then the flame would gradually grow until its brightness would completely blind him, after which the traveler was entirely at Jack's mercy, and he would lead him where he pleased. Stories are related of young men who had been led miles out of their way in this manner, especially young men going to see their sweethearts on dark winter nights. So, theories.
And this was in the UK?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I'll leave the link in the actual location in the show notes and at Editing Lisa, enter the correct country here. Editing Lisa, it was Wales. Who knew?
I didn't even think about will-o'-wisp being related to jack-lanterns and stuff.
And the Irish story that I heard of for jack-o'-lanterns is that some guy called Jack, like,
Had a lantern.
well, so he couldn't get into heaven, and he screwed over the devil and
I
wouldn't get
heard
into
that
hell.
story before.
And so now he carries a fire around in a radish or something.
Because
Or-
they used to use radishes.
yeah, instead of pumpkins.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which are way creepier.
Yeah.
TBH.
Yeah.
Look up the jack-o'-lantern, or is it turnips? Something like that. Jack-o'-lantern, not pumpkin. Radishes?
Oh my God.
Did you?
Yeah. That
did
is
you look at
creepier.
the turnip
Yeah.
one?
Yeah. Some of these look like
They're terrifying.
actual faces.
This is why
like,
they thought they would ward off demons, because that
Yeah.
would ward off
Yeah.
a demon.
I mean, yeah. Oh my God.
I just saw the fear in your eyes when you opened that Google tab.
Oh my God. Anyway, so
They're creepy.
they are very creepy. I'll leave a link here in the show notes. But theories.
Theories.
There are theories about what they are.
Okay. I'm ready.
Because I alluded to earlier, it's seen basically on every continent that has some sort of swamp. And so the most prevalent theory is that it's swamp gas. The earliest observation that I saw, at least in a passing mention, is from 1704 in Optics, or a treatise of the reflections, refractions, inflections, and colors of light, by some dude called Isaac Newton.
Never heard of him.
That guy.
I heard of fig Newtons. The same thing.
Yeah, so Isaac Newton, guy who observed gravity and started the calculations on that, basically invented calculus. So
Thanks a lot, Newton.
oh my God.
I never actually got
Yeah.
into calculus. I'm not bad at math.
I took
I'm
calculus
so bad at
and
math.
I took calculus and I'm still not entirely sure why. But so basically he was saying it's hard to observe what ignis fatuus is with 1704 technology because it's 1704. And it's just sort of observing that, like, different qualities of different fires and things like that.
Is not flame a vapor, fume, or exhalation heated red hot that is so hot to shine? For bodies do not flame without emitting a copious fume, and this fume burns the flame. The ignis fatuus is a vapor shining without heat. And is there not the same difference between a vapor and flame as between rotted wood shining without heat and burning coals of fire?
So it's basically comparing, like, well, here's this weird situation, here's this
Yeah.
other situation. Like, I don't know when microscopes were invented or how
Probably
people
not 1704.
yeah, but or how people observed methane. Like, I didn't look into that too hard, but
He was so smart.
Yeah.
Imagine having no resources or very little resources compared to what we know today, and just being like, this is a phenomenon.
yeah.
Let's look at it scientifically.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So there was another interesting one.
About swamp gas?
Yeah, theory about swamp gas. It's called the Rocky Hill experiment. It's in 1783, just after the revolution.
It's
Talk
that
about swamp
sparkling
gas.
water. No, I have been, like, every time I go
Yeah.
and swerve my
Yeah.
whole body, it's
Yeah.
because I have to burp. I don't want to burp into the mic.
Right. So it's 1783 in America. They're just outside of Princeton, New Jersey. It's, Revolutionary War just ended, and General George Washington suddenly found himself with a lot of time on his hands. And so he was in this farmhouse near Princeton, and Congress was meeting while waiting the arrival from France for the signed Treaty of Paris, which formally ended the war. And so they're like, okay, well, what do we do? So Thomas Paine was also around.
Oh
and
my God, they just people just hung
yeah,
out together,
yeah.
huh?
So in September, George Washington sent an invitation to Thomas Paine to join him in Rocky Hill, New Jersey, which I guess that was where they were headquartered, because Paine had served in Washington's army as an aide-de-camp to Nathaniel Greene in the fall of 1776. There were some delays. Paine got scarlet fever. They finally are starting to do stuff in October. Okay. And during the visit, this is an article from Mount Vernon. During the visit, Washington decided to conduct an experiment in response to persistent rumors. How could a creek close by possibly catch on fire?
Oh.
Benjamin Franklin, because I guess all of the heavy hitters are in this article, in a letter in a letter to Dr. Joseph Priestley, who discovered oxygen, described the mystery. So this is Benjamin Franklin. When I passed through New Jersey in 1764, I heard it several times mentioned that applying a lighted candle near the surface of some of their rivers, a sudden flame would catch and spread over the water, continuing to burn for near a half minute.
Whoa. That must have been a sight.
Yeah. Friendly arguments got going at Rocky Hill over what might cause the flaming water. And so Washington and Payne and some soldiers, they took a boat and went to a creek nearby. And Washington and others held that the water caught on fire because of bituminous matter rising to the surface when the creek bottom was stirred up with poles. But Payne thought it was due to inflammable air surfacing. And I just think it's wild that flammable and inflammable have the same meaning, basically. But Payne wrote about the experiment in 1806, and he said, George Washington placed himself at one end of the scow, and I at the other. Each of us held a roll of cartridge paper, which we lighted and held over the water about 2 or 3 inches from the surface, when the soldiers began disturbing the bottom of the river with poles. When the mud at the bottom was disturbed by the poles, the air bubbles rose fast, and I saw the fire take from General Washington's light and descend from thence to the surface of the water, in a similar manner as when a lighted candle is held, so as to touch the smoke of a candle just blown out. The smoke will take fire, and the fire will descend and light upon the candle. This was demonstrative evidence that what was called setting the river on fire was actually setting on fire the inflammable air that rose out of the mud.
Huh.
So it's like disturbing the river will make it so you can set the creek on fire.
Yeah, because of the air, not necessarily the water.
Yeah.
Were they on the boat when they were doing this? I hope not. I hope they were on shore.
Yeah.
Because they like, well, let's test if the water can set on fire while we're in a wooden boat.
Yeah. I mean, okay, so I'm like looking back over this, and it doesn't say.
It said Washington was holding one end.
Oh yeah, so one Washington was one end of the scow, and I at the other. And I just looked it up, and scow is a wide-beamed sailing dinghy.
So they were on a boat,
yeah,
just testing if this lake was flammable or this creek was flammable. That's hilarious.
Yep.
Boys will be boys.
Yeah. Which is hilarious because at that point George Washington was like 50.
I know. It was a hold my beer moment. Yep. That's what it was. No, yeah, because when you said George Washington, I was like, oh, was when he was a surveyor, but no, that's when he was a kid. And
yeah.
No, he was a surveyor, so he must have seen a lot of weird stuff.
Yeah, I mean, he was a surveyor when he was like 17.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like before he joined
before he got anywhere interesting. So the counterpoint to the swamp gas theory is that most accounts say that it produces kind of a steady flame, and will-o'-the-wisps are more brief bits, and methane wouldn't account for the moving.
Yeah.
And in order to get the light onto the swamp gas, you need to have a light already with you. Like, you need to set it on fire.
Oh, so if you're just walking through the woods at night and you don't have a light with you, and then you see a light in the distance, you wouldn't be able to. Basically, that light shouldn't have been able to exist if you didn't already do it.
Correct.
Interesting.
Yeah. So the counterpoint to the counterpoint is...
Oh, okay. Never mind.
So apparently someone named Volta had suggested phosphine as a substance that could make marsh gas self-ignite. I'm just going to start that entire sentence over.
Let's do that.
So I found this from a paleontology newsletter, of all places, which suggests that someone named Volta had suggested phosphine as a substance that might make marsh gas self-ignite. And this person says, sure enough, make phosphine and spontaneous ignition will occur, but with a bright flash and clouds of white smoke. And this particular compound has not been detected in gases emanating from stagnant phosphate-bearing soils. The ghost seems stubbornly absent from this particular machine. I love that line.
Interesting.
And
can you explain that for me in layman's terms?
So, basically, trying to make phosphine, it will self-ignite, but it'll go like boom and make a it won't be like this faint little thing
Yeah.
away in the distance. It's like you'll see it because there's like smoke and shit.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it.
And apparently, cold flames can be produced by either carbon disulfide, which heated just below ignition point, and maybe that could be a clue because there were a number of candidates for something akin to carbon disulfide or P2H4.
Editing Lisa here. Carbon disulfide is different than P2H4. P2H4 is called diphosphate. Just wanted to make sure that was clear. Okay, bye.
Was unearthed by scouring Victorian era organic chemistry literature, but nothing quite fits, basically. Point being, there's a couple of things that it could be, but not all of which fit all of the fact pattern of a sufficient amount.
Okay. Interesting. I failed chemistry twice, so I am so lost right now, but I trust you. And
Basically,
you know, I'm sure that when I listen back, I'll be like, oh, I get it.
oh
But
yes, it's definitely not carbon disulfide. Yeah. So basically, point being, if you're looking for the chemical reaction, you can get mostly there, but not all there. Other suggested ones have been, and this was an article discussing the Min lights, but
this is another suggested theory besides swamp gas.
besides swamp gas. And so the Min lights are similar but slightly different in Australia. But one suggested one was luminous microorganisms, which could be associated with flying insects or a bird.
Ooh, like
And
a
this-
firefly or something.
Similar, but like longer lasting than a firefly.
Got it.
And so this comes up a couple of times, but the counterpoint to this one is from this one scientific article that it basically counterpoints its own counterpoint. And quote, while bioluminescent fungi are known from a variety of sites around Australia and could theoretically contaminate a flying bird or insect, no one has ever caught or even observed the proposed insect or bird.
Oh.
The explanation is also incompatible with the great brilliance of the Min, which on occasions can illuminate the landscape and cast bright shadows, a feat not observed even with even the brightest bioluminescence. And so that's why Min are similar but slightly different than Ignis Fatuus. But the theory of the cloud of flying luminous insects, keeping going here, has an initial appeal because most accounts of the Min include a description of a bright ball with dynamic fuzzy edges.
Oh.
The problem with this explanation, this person goes on, apart from the issue of brightness and the absence of any descriptions of such luminous flying things in contrast to the repeated observations of the Min, is that one would not expect a cloud of flying insects to maintain a roughly circular outline as Min almost always do.
So basically, it's possible for insects to get infected with this fungus. There's no actual evidence that this has happened. And if it did happen, it wouldn't look like how they are describing it looks.
Yeah. And the paleontology newsletter suggested, like, maybe you go to a swamp or wherever and try and, like, catch one and like stick it in a tube and like reverse engineer it. But it also pointed out that a lot of naturally occurring swamps are starting to be filled in, and so you can't because the conditions aren't there anymore.
Which is, I guess, people don't really see will-o-the-wisps anymore then, right? Because DC is a swamp, or it used to be. In Virginia. And obviously during Washington's time they saw stuff, but they don't really see stuff anymore.
Yeah. And I wonder if it's a combination of like it's getting filled in and also with a large reduction in using fire to light our way. Because we have, as you said, we have like phone lights now and stuff like that.
We have street
lights, flashlights, there's
headlights on the cars.
Yeah, you don't
People don't really walk places anymore either.
But
at night,
yeah. But when you do, you have an electric way of lighting your way, not a fire way of lighting your way. And so I wonder if that's the other end of the reduction of sightings, because I wonder if that fire component was larger.
Do you
I
think there
wonder if
could
the
have
fire
actually been like other people or other fires that they saw and they just kind of got lost
maybe
and said it was a will-o'-the-wisp?
maybe yeah.
Also, for supernatural explanations, did you figure out like why? I guess you kind of answered it in the beginning where it's like they're trying to lead you towards harm.
Yeah,
But is the will-o'-the-wisp actively malicious?
it depends on the region.
Okay.
It's hard to determine the degree to which they're sentient in a lot of situations, and so that's the main players. Like, can you actively lead someone to harm, intend to lead someone to harm, if you can't actively think?
Yeah.
Until we know the degree to which this thing can think for itself, we don't know
Yeah.
like the degree to which it intends to harm anything.
Yeah.
Some regions say yes, absolutely. Other regions say like you're a dumbass if you follow it. And
Got it.
But that's all I have.
Wow.
Kind of a short one today. Yeah, it's a short one today. But what do y'all think?
I was actually trying to find if there was any will-o'-the-wisp things here in what's it called? In this book that I have, which was written by Oscar Wilde's mother.
And who I quoted heavily, I think, in the Banshee episode as well.
I couldn't find any will-o'-the-wisp things, but then again, have read this book, and the Irish people that she interviewed were really into fairies.
Yeah.
I wonder how much of it kind of interconnects.
Yeah,
and like,
probably a lot. From what I saw, it's often quite baked into whatever mythos is about.
I would love to do a part 2 with
Yeah.
not international, but
But,
like
like,
other
regions
legends,
and
yeah.
legends. Yeah. But with all of that said, join us on Patreon. We're going to be reading some of that Irish stories, or what's it called?
Irish cures, mystic charms, and superstitions.
By Lady Wilde, connected to Oscar Wilde. And so join us on Patreon to hear what she has to say. If you want to follow us on socials, we are at Dreary Midnight Pod. Patreon is patreon.com/drearymidnight. If you have any thoughts, questions, feelings, stories, local myths, frustrations about garbage trucks driving behind you.
If you have seen... Oh, okay, let's wait for that
Yeah.
to go. If you have seen Brave and enjoy it, or don't enjoy it, or if you know what scene I'm talking about, or if you haven't seen it, if you plan on seeing it, tell us
If you
that
have
too.
any opinions whatsoever about the film Brave,
The soundtrack is great.
I've heard great things about the soundtrack.
It's
But send us an email confirming our feelings, drearymidnightpodcast@gmail.com. And with all that said, use electricity and
Don't follow the will-o'-the-wisp.
Yeah. Be careful around water in general at night.
And don't set a creek on fire.
Just don't. All right. And with all that said, safe travels home on this dreary midnight. Good night.
Good night.